Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us back. Actually, we had our first candidate forum in this exact room about 4 months ago. So I'm Scott Weiner, and I have the honor of running to represent this district in the California State Senate. And I'm running because now more than ever, we need strong and effective leadership around the many challenges facing our community, from housing to transportation and congestion to the drought and climate change and income inequality, to homelessness and mental health, to the state of our public schools and access to health care. And I have a track record of working extremely hard for our community and getting things done for our community, and I will do that work in the state Senate. Just a little bit about my background. My family came here as immigrants from Russia and Eastern Europe, fleeing the pogroms and the violence against Jews, and made lives for themselves in this country. My father, who suffers from a disability, was unable to hold a job because back then people with disabilities weren't protected from employment discrimination. So he started a small business. My mother, who was a public school teacher, left teaching to work with him. And my parents raised me and my sister, and they taught me some basic values: to treat everyone with respect. And they taught me that government exists to make sure that everyone has a fair shot to succeed. And that is really the value that I bring to my life and to my public service. I moved to San Francisco almost 20 years ago as a young gay man to make a life for myself. I moved into the Castro. For the last almost 20 years, I have absolutely poured myself into this community, working day and night. I'm one of the core group of people who built the LGBT Community Center. I served as chair of the San Francisco Democratic Party. I served as president of my neighborhood association and co-founded a neighborhood safety group in the Castro when we had a crime spree and when gay men were getting raped in our neighborhood. I have worked very hard for our community. I have the honor of having been elected to the Board of Supervisors in 2010, along with Supervisor Kim. And on the board, I have focused on the issues that I believe are going to really determine the future of our city and our region. I have been the leading champion at City Hall on transportation issues, and particularly investment in public transportation, whether it is authoring Proposition B, the tied transit fund and the population growth, authoring the legislation to require a subway master plan, or authoring the legislation to require residential developers for the very first time to pay transportation impact fees. I have fought hard to make sure that San Francisco's housing policy actually matches the need of our growing population. I've authored 3 pieces of legislation to allow for the creation of new rent-controlled in-law units, legislation to streamline the approval process for affordable housing, and legislation to make it easier for universities to build student housing for the nearly 100,000 college and graduate students enrolled in this city. I have fought for healthcare access, whether it's making sure we are keeping our commitment to people living with HIV, making sure that low-income children can access dental care, or pushing back against the soda industry to protect our community from the explosion of type 2 diabetes. I have fought for our schools, and I have fought for our environment, including legislation to make us the first city in the country to require water recycling in new developments, and the first large city to require solar panels on the roofs of new buildings that we build. I have fought for our community over and over again, and I want to fight for us and for our values in Sacramento. We have big shoes to fill. Following in the footsteps of our great Senator Mark Leno, and I am honored to have Senator Leno's endorsement in this race. I am also honored to be the officially endorsed candidate of the Democratic Party, to have the endorsement of the California League of Conservation Voters, as well as endorsements from Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris and Dianne Feinstein and David Chu and Jackie Speer. I would be honored to have your support as well, and I look forward to the debate tonight. Thank you.
But I do want to recognize the District 6 and the District 3 Democratic Club for being here, United Players and our Home Sharers Club as well. My name is JaneKim, and I have the honor of representing the district that we are in today, which includes Mission Bay, South of Market, Tenderloin, and Treasure Island. The district that I represent is very representative of many of the things that we are seeing throughout the city and county of San Francisco. I represent the poorest residents of San Francisco, and as of a year and a half ago, I now also represent the wealthiest zip code. Many of our major employers are in this district, and we are currently absorbing 80% of all the office and residential growth here in the city. This has really given me an opportunity to lead on a number of very important citywide issues, ranging from job creation with the mid-market tax exclusion my first year, to creating and building housing, and figuring out how we do smart growth and build complete neighborhoods for the new residents that are coming to San Francisco. I am proud of the fact that I have built and fought for more affordable housing than any member of this board. In fact, 56% of all of San Francisco's affordable housing is being built in this district today. I'm also proud of the fact that in developments where we typically see 12, maybe 15% affordable housing on site, I have fought in 3 major deals in the district that I represent where we are achieving 40% affordable and middle-income housing. What is also, thank you, what is also unprecedented about this deal is not just that we are building 40% affordable and middle-income housing, but we are building middle-income housing finally. We have never seen deals where we are building middle-income housing before, and we are finally building for households that make between $80,000 and $150,000 a year. Incredibly good income, but we now have to fight to subsidize that type of housing so that the middle class can still afford to live in this great city, whether it is our nurses, our teachers, our entry-level office workers, even our entry-level tech workers. We want to make sure that San Francisco continues to be a place that many people can call home and still work here. Prior to serving on the Board of Supervisors, I served as the president of our Board of Education. And before that, I was a youth organizer for 6 years, working with young people and families around issues of education and community planning. I'm proud that during my time on the Board of Education, that for the first time ever, San Francisco United School District finally started closing something that we call the Achievement and Opportunity Gap. We're finally starting to see a narrowing in test score achievements between our lowest performing students and our highest performing students. I also got to oversee the district during time when our school enrollment finally started going up for the first time since the 1980s. And I'm really proud of the fact that I'm working with this community here today to tell SFUSD and to work with them to build its first new elementary school in many, many, many years, acknowledging that the city is growing, that we are growing in our families, and we want our families to stay here. 2 weeks ago, I introduced a proposal to make City College free for all San Francisco residents. And what is incredibly exciting about that, if we pass in November, and actually one thing I'm confident about this year, and I will predict, is that we will win that for the next school year for City College, is that we will be the first city in the nation to make community college free for all of our residents, regardless of income or age or any type of prerequisites. And that is the San Francisco way. We are leading for this nation and saying what local government should provide and what cities should provide in order to continue to be healthy, stronger, and safer. And that is part of the platform that I represent. I'm also proud to have authored the strongest tenant protection legislation in the country last fall, where we are finally taking on frivolous and re-incentivized evictions here in San Francisco. Over 70% of evictions in San Francisco target seniors, individuals with disabilities, and immigrants who speak English as a second language. These are the most vulnerable of our residents, and it is upon us to make sure that we are protecting them to stay in place in the homes that they live in. Yes, we need to create and build more housing, but we also have to stabilize and keep residents in place.
Supervisor Kim, you'll have the first question to start with. The first question is, there are various ways the state of California can help address the affordable housing crisis in San Francisco. What top initiatives will you bring or support at the state level to do so?
Sure, I think that there are 3 important steps that the state can work with San Francisco and the rest of the state of California to help preserve housing and also to build more housing throughout the state. 1, we need to look at reforming Costa-Hawkins. Costa-Hawkins is currently limiting local municipalities' ability, to require developers to build more affordable housing, particularly in rental developments, which is what we are primarily building today. In the June of last year, the California Supreme Court actually made a very interesting ruling that it is within local municipalities' police powers to require affordable housing on site in the very same ways that we require use and height and other types of zoning requirements. We need to expand this to rental developments through reforming Costa-Hawkins and also at re-examining our rent control ordinance statewide. Second, we must overturn the Ellis Act. The Ellis Act is frankly being used here in the city and county of San Francisco to push out the most vulnerable amongst us. And they're largely being done by 10 large property owner companies. It is not being done by the vast majority of small property owners. These Ellis Act evictions are largely being done by 7 to 10 companies here in San Francisco, and we must stop this and we must reform it. Third, we must increase the amount of funding that we are giving to affordable and middle-income housing. There was a time, decades ago, that we used to adequately fund affordable and public housing both at the federal and state level, and there were more housing units available than those on the waiting list. In fact, if you became homeless, it often took several days to find you housing than the months and years that it takes today. That is upon state and federal government to provide. We can do more. There are currently legislation and bills on deck today, for example, by Assemblyman Tony Thurmond, to increase grants for middle-income workforce housing for teachers and nurses. We need to do more initiatives like that to make San Francisco and the state of California work.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Weiner?
Thank you. So there are a few key things that the state can do and should do. The first is that the state must do not just a little bit more, but dramatically more to help fund affordable housing. It can't just be on local communities. When you just put it on local communities to fund affordable housing, then it depends on how many resources a particular town or city has. It is the responsibility of the state to make sure that every community, San Francisco and otherwise, has the resources that we need to create affordable housing. And I believe that right now, the housing crisis is no longer just San Francisco and a few other expensive cities. This is a contagion that is going throughout the state, and more California communities are struggling. So I think we will see greater momentum in the state legislature in terms of coalitions to be able to address housing issues, including significant investment in affordable housing. Second, the state has to provide much better incentives for local communities to create enough housing, including enough affordable housing. Local communities should not be able to say, no housing here, no affordable housing here. And we know that there are some communities that simply refuse to build any housing. It can't just be San Francisco, it can't just be Oakland. We know in the Bay Area, our housing crisis, we're not in a funnel, we're not in a vacuum here. This is interconnected, and it is a Bay Area problem, and the Bay Area has to work together. And right now, we set housing goals for every city and town in the Bay Area, and then it sits and collects dust. It's unenforceable, and we have to have better incentives so that all communities are participating. And then we must reform the Ellis Act. I have such enormous respect for Senator Leno's tenacity to fight for so many years, and he finally was able to make progress to get Ellis Act reform out of the Senate, and then it died in the Assembly. We need to continue that fight, and I will continue that fight because it is unacceptable the level of displacement that we are seeing in San Francisco.
Thank you, Supervisor Weiner. We'll move on to the second question. Let me read that. And Supervisor Weiner, you will start with your answer. So according to both police and prosecutors in San Francisco, quality of life crimes are now more difficult to prosecute as felonies because of state law and Prop 47, which was passed in 2014. Police say that repeat offenders are responsible for much of these crimes in our city. What is your approach to hold those accountable for committing these types of crimes, for example, home evasion, car break-ins, bike thefts, which do not injure the general public but cost us millions and impact our quality of lives? These crimes are on the increase in many neighborhoods.
Thank you for the question. So I've been a strong supporter of criminal justice reform. I supported 3 strikes reform, decriminalization of drug possession, realignment, and I supported Prop 47, and I continue to support it. And the spike in crime that we're seeing in San Francisco started several years before Prop 47 was passed. So we need to address these crimes, but Prop 47 did not make these crimes not crimes anymore. There are some crimes that used to be felonies that are now misdemeanors. People can still be arrested for these crimes, they can still be prosecuted for these crimes, they can still spend time in jail, county jail, where appropriate. So we need to embrace criminal justice reform to move away from mass incarceration, but there still needs to be accountability for people's behavior. And so this is not an issue of Prop 47, this is an issue of our criminal justice system here in San Francisco. We need to make sure it shouldn't take someone being arrested 10, 12, 15, 20 times for breaking into cars to have any consequences. And that doesn't mean locking someone up and throwing away the key, but it means having consequences for that kind of criminal behavior that has huge impacts on communities. We are seeing a veritable explosion of crime, or particularly auto break-ins, vandalism, street crime in San Francisco, where people don't feel safe walking down the street, and there have to be consequences for that. But we also have to make sure that we are investing in mental health. The mental health safety net in this state has basically evaporated. And right now, sometimes to get mental health services, you have to commit a crime and go to jail, and it shouldn't be that way. We need to rebuild our mental health safety net. The state must do more. We need to build a mental health facility in San Francisco. And so these two things are not mutually exclusive. They complement each other. Accountability for behavior, but also giving people access to the services they need to be healthy.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Kim?
Thank you. I'm actually going through a lot of what I was going to say about Proposition 47 as well. And I think it's often a misnomer that people think that we have decriminalized these activities when we haven't. In fact, we should also know that 80% of auto burglary arrests that are made here in San Francisco are prosecuted by the district attorney's office. But here's where we can do a little bit more. I don't believe the answer is greater sentencing or more jail time, which frankly is an incredible burden on our budget and has not been demonstrated to show that there is more deterrence or change in behavior after that. But we need to actually invest in things like education and mental health behavioral centers. But we do know something that does work here based on data. And the Chronicle reported that when San Francisco Police Department actually put together a task force last year where they saturated certain hotspots with plainclothes officers, they saw a 33% reduction in property crimes and auto burglaries. And so I think that it's a mixture of making sure that we are putting out and deploying resources in adequate ways in different neighborhoods where we're seeing hotspots. But we also have to make the very difficult decision to invest in long-term solutions to make our cities safer and healthier and stronger. And that means investing in schools, in after-school programs, in pre-K, in behavioral mental health services, and not in our jails. We know that mass incarceration is not an answer. We tried that for the last 30 years, and it has not worked. It has not made this country safer. In fact, it has only added a burden to our state and federal and local budgets. In fact, here in California, over the last 30 years, this California state budget has proportionally largely stayed the same. There's only 2 items that changed significantly. One is our spending on prisons. It went up from 3% to 9% of our state budget. We increased that spending by 6%. We built 23 state prisons in the state of California during this time. There's only one other line item that changed significantly in the state of California, and that is our spending on higher education. It went down from 18 to 12%, exactly 6% of the state budget. And so while we invest in prisons, and we build 23 prisons, we only build 3 CSUs and 1 UC, and we work to raise the tuition at City College and all other levels. And that is the type of long-term decision-making that we have to change now.
Great, thank you, Supervisor Kim. Okay, next question, and Supervisor Kim, this question is for you to start with. We have many people living on our streets with addictions, mental health issues, who may not be able to care for themselves. These people end up in emergency rooms, being 5150, and let back out to live on the street with no support. What are your proposals to help these people?
My second year in office, I actually took on a commitment to a group of advocates and said that I would go through our shelter reservation system and spend a night in one of our single adult shelters personally. And I did that. I went to Mission Neighborhood Resource Center, I waited online, and I eventually got a bed at next door shelter in the district that I represent. And that night was incredibly eye-opening for me. It made me realize that our city treats homelessness largely as an economic issue, as an issue solely of poverty. But it's far more than that, and what I realized that night is that homelessness is also a public health issue. In fact, those that are staying in our shelter are far older and far sicker than even I had imagined. And yet we have minimum wage workers in our shelters, funded by these great nonprofits, but they have little training or resources to actually manage the demographics that come in. In fact, if you are too sick, they will kick you out of the shelter because they don't want to be liable for you. So we have a lot of work to do. So I spent the last 3 years fighting to get nurses in our shelters for the very first time. They started last February. We now have 4 nurses and health professionals that are there at night to help serve those residents. In fact, they need to see nurses every night because of the trauma that they're facing on our streets. Second, in last year's budget, I fought for and finally won $6 million to build a 24-hour medical respite shelter here in this district in the south of Market. This shelter is going to be staffed by clinicians, nurses, and psychologists that can actually help and support the sickest people on our street. So when you call the homeless outreach team and they go to that corner to deal with the person that you're seeing that is incredibly sick and in need of help, they're actually going to have somewhere to take them to. This is the kind of work that I'd like to bring at the state level. We need a consistent shelter and mental behavioral health system here in the state. In fact, Marin County and their states in this county and the state that don't have a 365-day shelter system. So where are they going to go? They're going to come to San Francisco and they're going to come to Los Angeles. Homelessness is a statewide regional issue. We see 36% of the nation's homeless count here in the state of California, and the state can do more.
Thank you so much. Supervisor Weiner.
Thank you very much. So we do have a real crisis on our streets. Over the last 10, 12 years, we have permanently housed something like 12,000 homeless people, and yet our homeless count is the same today as it was then. It is extremely frustrating. We do have a crisis of mental health and drug addiction on our streets, and mental illness is it is just tragic, and I talked about the safety net that we need to rebuild and the need for a mental health facility. Drug addiction on our street, it's worse than I've ever seen it before, between meth and heroin, and it's just absolutely tragic, and we have to make sure we are getting people stable and healthy. The goal needs to be to get people off of the streets and stable and healthy and onto a path toward permanent housing. The goal should not be to enable people to live and ultimately deteriorate and die on our streets. Our goal should not be to allow people, for example, to live in tents on our sidewalks. It is neither humane, nor safe, nor healthy for people to be living and ultimately dying in tents on our sidewalks. And that is a real difference in this race. I think we need to work very hard to get people out of the tents, and that tents as housing is not a good policy. Supervisor Kim supports state legislation, the so-called right to rest law, that would legalize pitching a tent on a sidewalk and would wipe away all of our city laws that say you can't build a tent or other structure on a public sidewalk. So that is a real difference in this race. We need to make sure that we are building significant supportive housing, permanent exits from homelessness for people, and that has to be an extremely high priority.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Weiner. We're gonna invoke the rebuttal for 30 seconds for Supervisor Kim.
This is a significant difference between Supervisor Weiner and I. While he has satisfactorily called for the sweeps of homeless people on our streets and under bridges, I've actually been working on solutions to bring them to. It's one thing to say that it's inhumane to pitch a tent on the street, but it's also inhumane to sweep people when you don't have a place to put them. I have worked to build a navigation center in the district I represent. I'd like to see a navigation center in District 8 in the Castro and Noe Valley as well. In fact, there should be a navigation center in every district in the city, but yet it is the South of Market and the Tenderloin that has continued to accept the services and the compassion to understand that the poorest residents on our street have and need somewhere to go. In fact, we have been the places where we are building the houses and the shelter and the services, and I'm proud to work with our district residents to continue that.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Do you have a rebuttal on that? Okay, please, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Supervisor Weiner.
I think it's a gross mischaracterization to say that I support just doing a sweep but not doing anything about it. The goal is to get people into shelter, into housing. And what happened on Division Street with that huge tent encampment there, where Supervisor Kim criticized the mayor for addressing that encampment, I supported it. A lot of those people were transitioned into shelter. In terms of District 8, the district that I represent, I have been very supportive of having homeless services in that district. I have obtained funding for housing to get homeless youth off the street in the Upper Market area. I have supported Lyric and other programs in our neighborhood to make sure that homeless people are stable and have the services that they
Thank you,
need.
Supervisor Weiner.